Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 102, brought to you by the one and only, the legendary Black Belt Magazine. Thank you to everybody tuning in tonight because we have one heck of a show. Pretty unique. Richard Plowden is going to be coming on the podcast, and he had an idea when he was last on the show. He was like, Jackson, you're always learning about other people's stories on this podcast. I want to know your story, right? And even off the air, we talked about, some questions that he had and went through some of my journey a little bit. Well, today we're actually going to carry through with that idea, and I'm going to interview him first. We're going to ask some questions about his awesome family and their performances at the Ocean State Grand Nationals. We're also going to talk about the merger between Team KTOC and Team Impex. So there is going to be a little bit of a Richard Plowden interview, but then we're going to flip the script. He's going to ask me some questions. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. But before we get into that, we do have some news that we need to cover in sport karate this week. Above all else, as you may have already seen through social media, and as you can see scrolling across the bottom right now, want to extend my personal condolences and send prayers to the family of Ray Bryant Jr., recently named a co-promoter of the Pan American Internationals. He passed away on Wednesday. I don't know any of the details, but regardless, very tragic for this to happen to the community. And if you're in the sport karate community, you saw on social media how many people this affected. He was a great competitor in his time as well. In present day, helps out around tournaments, was a great judge, obviously joining the promoting staff of the Pan American Internationals. So in general, a huge loss for the sport karate community to suffer. And again, I extend my condolences and prayers to his family and everyone who loved Ray Bryant Jr. So an unfortunate beginning to the show tonight, but definitely wanted to take the opportunity to pay homage to him. Shifting gears a little bit, some other sport karate news this week. We've got a couple of birthdays today. So Team Paul Mitchell member Haley Glass, as well as Team Paul Mitchell alumni Zolt Marati, they both celebrate birthdays today. So happy birthday to both of them. And in other sport karate news this week, Team All Out, which is the team that was started by Alex Mancias with the regional sponsorship by the Orange Theory branch that he works at, which is where the logo comes from and all that. So Alex Mancias put together his little squad of Team All Out. They announced a new fighting coach. Regina Thompson is going to be a designated fighting coach for that team. Some iconic leadership coming from Regina Thompson. So congratulations to Team All Out for securing a Texas legend, a sport karate legend as part of their coaching staff. And that is going to do it for this week in sport karate, which means I'm going to get rid of that news bar. And it's time for me to make you guys stop waiting and bring in the main event of the evening. We have the one and only Richard Plowden, the legend himself. Anybody that's been following this podcast for a while saw his first episode, heard the stories, and we kind of called each other sport karate addicts, and that is going to be very clear in the show this evening. So, Mr. Plowden, thank you so much for taking the time. Any opening comments for us?
Well, thank you, Jackson. And I also want to extend my condolences to Ray Bryant's family. Ray was part of our sport karate family for the last 30 years at least, and involved with international competition at all. And it's going to be a great loss. And really, we want to say rest in peace to his wife also.
Sir, beautifully said.
Yep.
And so as we dive into the show tonight, like I told everybody, I want to start by talking about your guys a little bit first. Because if I'm going to have you on the show, I'm going to take advantage of it, and I'm going to ask you some questions, right?
Okay.
So what I wanted to lead off with was Ocean State's was a very impressive weekend for both Morgan and Avery, right? I want to start with Morgan because Morgan showed up to that tournament and was as dominant as in my lifetime watching fighting, as dominant as I've ever seen a fighter be at a single event. She was spreading people left and right, won everything there was to win. So talk about it from your perspective as dad and also from the coach's chair. What's that like, just sitting back and watching truly a master at work?
Well, Jackson, I'm fortunate because I get to see the cake when it's being baked, right? And, people at the tournament, they see the end result. But, in my 50 years almost of being involved in martial arts, I've never had a student work as hard as Morgan does. Morgan outworks the guys, and she leads the majority of the workouts with the guys, and she's a workout beast, and so that translates into into success in the ring. I tell people in order to beat her consistently, somebody's got to be an addict. They have to run, they have to do all of the exercises and then the drills that she does. But I'm proud of her. She's definitely a special competitor. And Jackson, she's so humble. And that's important also. She carries herself like a professional. Even when she's upset, the general public will never know it.
And that's one of the things that I love about Morgan too, is her professionalism and how great of a role model she is off the mat. And so it's interesting. I love the comment you made about how you get to see the cake being baked, right? So when you guys are training leading up to a tournament, like that week before Ocean States, can you kind of tell already, like, okay, particularly this weekend, everybody's in trouble? And are there some tournaments where you're like, Morgan, you're not looking your best right now? Does that happen?
That's a really interesting question, because she's doing some things right now. Like tonight is our fight night, right? But she's doing things. I see her do things on Friday nights that she hadn't been doing before. And a lot of it revolves around her timing. She's got an impeccable timing, and she's sticking my guys. And they laugh at it. They've come to kind of expect it. But again, the dictionary is the only place where success comes before work, and she works super hard. So to answer your question, also though, it's difficult to evaluate somebody's preparedness based on how good or how bad they may look in the gym, because I had some weeks where I know as a competitor I felt like and looked like crap, and then tournament day came and boom, the light bulb went on. So it's difficult to predict. So much of it is mindset.
I love that perspective. And I feel the same thing, granted, very different for a forms and weapons competitor as opposed to a fighter. But even for me, like a lot of the times I would have terrible training sessions the day before I left for a tournament, and then show up to the tournament and everything wind up being okay. So I do like that, like, no, you can't really predict it. It's just you get to the tournament, and if you're on, you're on. So not much more to say about Morgan. She was dominant. It's a result of her hard work. I mean, you could go on and on with the compliments, but there's not really much that you can say other than how dominant she's been. And I know that as a competitor, she's looking forward to that next challenge, that next person that's going to come up and start to give her a run for her money so she can elevate her game to another level. So with that, I want to pivot to Avery and talking about having to elevate your game to another level, right? Point fighting right now is as deep as I've seen it maybe in the last decade, especially on the lightweight side. You look at the lightweights that can come up and wind up in that VFT last man standing in the open weight, what have you. But there's some world-class heavyweights out there right now, particularly with a guy like Elijah now moving up and fighting heavy when he was at Ocean States, right? So first, in a field that deep, just tell us a little bit about, again, like we talked about with Morgan, that week leading up to it. What does that week leading up to the tournament look like for Avery, knowing how stacked that field is going to be with Ocean States and the money that they were putting on the line? You knew top-name fighters were going to show up.
Well, again, so much of it is mental preparedness. It is a sin in my world to get tired doing a tournament match. So they're already going to be in great shape. Anybody that's affiliated with me is going to have to be in superior shape physically. But then it's the mental attitude too, and that's one of Avery's major strengths. It's his mental attitude, his drive, his determination. And now that he's on the upper echelon of fighters in the world, it's really something to think about, because he looks at it as a young person. He got a chance to fight Ross, he got a chance to fight Jai, he got a chance to fight Raymond, got a chance to fight Trevor, and all of that is paying off now. All of that experience from going to war with those guys, some of them a couple of times. So that helps. So each one of them, each tournament is just another goal. It's another thing to hit. And I tell folks, so many people focus on the individual. Well, I want to fight this person, I want to fight that. Well, what if that person loses at a tournament? Then you're disappointed because you're not going to get a chance to fight them. It's going to mess with your head. The objective is to win the event, regardless of who's there, win the doggone tournament. And that's what the preparedness in the weeks before, that's what it has to be. You want to be, Jesse coined the right phrase, the last man standing. You want to be the last person at the end of the night who has no losses. That is such an exhilarating feeling.
I love that. And again, every time that I have you on the show, I love hearing how much we're on the same wavelength about these things. Because I was literally telling a student about this earlier this week because we were going over strategy for the Battle of Atlanta, right? And there's this new move that they want to put in their form. And I was like, well, hey, you've got 3 weapons divisions. You've got creative, musical, and extreme. Try it in one of them. And if it doesn't work, well, it doesn't work. It's okay. You've still got the other 2 divisions. And they looked at me funny and they were like, so we just don't care if I win creative weapons? And I was like, I didn't say that. It's not that we don't care if you win creative weapons. It's that the goal of the tournament is not to win all 3 divisions. The goal of the tournament is to leave with the overall grand.
Say that again, Jackson.
Tournament, your number 1 goal is leave with the overall grand. In forms and weapons, it doesn't matter if you won 1 division or if you won 12 divisions. If you don't leave with the overall grand, it doesn't matter. And so hearing that from you and talking about be the last fighter standing, that resonates with me so much. And so I want to get to, and I feel like I'm going to get a really cerebral answer here. So I'm setting you up a little bit. I want to talk about adjustments, right? Because kind of the story that was born from Ocean States in heavyweights was Elijah moving up, Avery being the guy, and then the battles those 2 had because they matched up 3 times, right? They had the first matchup in the super fights thing, right? It was in the eliminations there where Avery handled him, right? Won by a good margin, wasn't that close. Obviously, Elijah fought well, but Avery beat him, right? Then we go to teams where Elijah's able to get a win there, right? And then the other time they fought was in the heavyweight grand. Correct. Great back and forth fight, closely contested. Elijah's able to come away with that one, right? They were so evenly matched over the course of the weekend that when the black belt ratings team got together and tried to decide, well, who's going to be the number 1, it was like they got a tie because we don't know. We don't know, right? So in your opinion, what was going on between the first fight, getting that win, and then what are you talking about? What were the things you were seeing as a coach going into knowing that you're going to fight Elijah on Saturday night? What adjustments are being talked about to stay ahead? And then what things do you think went well and what areas do you think that you guys can still improve in that particular matchup? Because I know we don't like to talk about individual fighter versus individual fighter, but that's what the community fixates.
Oh, no doubt about it. And I can't say a whole lot because I think, and Avery and I've talked about it, I think Elijah made an adjustment in that last fight, the grand championship fight, that Avery didn't adjust to. Right. And I want Elijah to keep doing it and let's play with it and see what happens. But he's such a great competitor. He really is. And that of course we've always said in our sport that rivalries are important. So that that type of situation does become important. It becomes something that we hope to see more of, even though him coming over here often would be quite expensive. So we have to sometime meet in the middle maybe. But no, I don't want to say too much. One thing I will say too, though, is that Avery feels as if he needs to be in better shape. So I will say this sitting here, and he's out of the country right now, so I don't think he's watching this. But he's probably lost right now about 12 pounds, and he's trying to get down a little lighter. He feels as if he wasn't as fast as he should be, and that those kinds of things motivate you, right? I can remember Zolt beating him, and that was a heck of a motivator. And then he'll have a crazy instructor who, when students lose to different people, they become that person for a day or so. So you keep hearing that person's name in class, and you're being called, and it can be motivating.
And I find that to be really fascinating, that adjustment. And again, we're not going to get into the fine details because we don't want to give anything away, right? But that's when you listen to some of these other podcasts and you see the things that people post, when people talk about Elijah, that is the number one thing. It's like his blitz is so fast. They talk about his speed, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see
he made a different adjustment, which didn't surprise me, honestly, because Raymond was in his corner, right? And Raymond Daniels was the king of adjustments. It's one thing to make an adjustment from one fight to another fight. Raymond's adjustments took place in the middle of the fight. I think about him fighting Ross at Amerikick, right? And the first round, Ross went out, did his thing. Raymond made adjustments and beat him. Same thing happened Canadian Open. Avery and Raymond fought. And Avery jumped out to a lead. Raymond made an adjustment and pulled the fight out. And everyone can't do that. So it's a chess game for real, because you and I are fighting, you make an adjustment, then I make an adjustment, then you make an adjustment. That's so rare. That's elite. And that's one of the things that helped make Raymond Daniels such a great fighter, his mentality.
Right. And I think that sums up exactly why this matchup is so fascinating, is because we know the fight IQ of the fighters and the fight IQ of the coaches on both sides is at such an elite level that it's going to be crazy to watch. Hopefully, the more and more that we get to see the two of them match up. And the other thing that's so great about the sport right now, we're talking about that matchup because that's what we got at Ocean States. There's so many other great matchups, right? If you look at just the people that Avery could wind up fighting, if you include the open weight and all that, right? Avery and Jack is always going to be a great fight. You got D Stacks, who went and won a Warrior Cup. Seeing Avery and D Stacks fight more. Tyson, who's coming up, right? Bailey's going to be coming back after finishing up with his track season, right? So there's so many incredible high level matchups that we can get in sport karate right now. And it has me on the edge of my seat for Battle of Atlanta so that we get to see some of that. Which brings me to Battle of Atlanta being the debut tournament for the merged team KTOC and Impex. And I just want to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about that, because it's huge news. It's two big programs coming together. Impex, a ton of history, a ton of great fighters over the years. So just tell us about kind of how that move came to be and how excited you are for it.
Well, Jason Chen, I've had sponsors since 1985, and Jason's one of the best ever. I mean, he really cares about the individuals that he sponsors, and he felt a sense of obligation to each one of the teams, and that was pre-COVID, where he was going through that, because, his daughter, Amanda, embarking on a stellar career. Jason's not then as vested in martial arts the same way, but he had this awesome company, and then COVID hit, and his ability to get product back into America became very difficult. And if your priorities are somewhere else, because he had a thriving business that he needed to work to survive, So I'm watching this, and he and I had a couple of conversations, and it was time. It was time on so many different levels. So I'm someone, Jackson, who Morgan and Avery don't have to have a sponsor. You know what I mean? That's the sponsorship thing for me was always giving people a way to get to the tournaments without them going broke, without them having, to have financial challenges, because it's difficult. I'm someone who took a Greyhound to a tournament before. That's how crazy I was. And there are a litany of different competitors who did crazy things like that, slept in hallways, put 12 people in a room and that type of thing. But at this stage of their lives with their professional careers and things, it's not like they have to have a sponsor to get to a tournament, right? But the sponsorship should be that means to an end. So you have some competitors who their goal is to get a sponsor. No, your goal is to use the sponsorship to win the grand championships, right? It doesn't stop with the sponsorship. So there are a lot of people who have that mindset. So, I wasn't sweating us not having a sponsor, but the world should know by now, Jody Tension and I are pretty close. So Jody told Sue, because she had no coach, he said, if you want to change your position, talk to Richard Plowden. And Sue said, Richard would never come and coach my team. That's just not going to happen. And Johnny put a bug in my ear and I said, okay, tell her to talk to me. And we did. We had conversations for a couple of months, trying to work some things out, and it happened. And just being blunt with you, Jackson, soon after that, I heard from some other teams who said, well, if you were looking for a merger, you should have contacted us. And that was more than one established team. But, it is what it is. I'm looking forward to it just because I think that we have some talent that we can have some fun with. And if you're not doing sport karate tournaments for fun, then you don't need to be doing it. So, sure. It's all about just having a good time.
I love it. And congratulations on the merger, because that's a huge deal. And I think it's a great situation for you guys. So now, and if the answer to this question is, I'm not saying anything, that can be the answer to this question. But are we going to see a KTOC 3-man team at Battle of Atlanta?
I don't know. Let me say that. I'll say this. I'll say this, and I love Hector Solori, right? I love Hector. Great fighter. He can't make Atlanta. So, I don't want to throw together a team just to have a team. I want to throw together a team that at the end of the night can be undefeated. Mm-hmm. So I have to kind of play with that and see what that looks like. That's an honest answer, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And whatever capacity you guys are there at, I'm excited to see it.
If I can have
the show, what's that?
If I can have Hector and Avery fighting together, with one or two other surprises, it will be interesting. So we'll see.
Yes, sir. Indeed. And what I was saying was, anybody that watches this show regularly knows that I am president of the Plowden Family Fan Club. And so regardless of what capacity you guys are there in, I'm going to be rooting for you. But anyway, so that does it for the questions I had for you, because I wanted to get through those recent events. And by the way, anybody tuning into this episode, if you want to hear more of Mr. Plowden's incredible backstory, the accomplishments of him, his family, it's truly an incredible story through martial arts and sport karate. If you go to the YouTube channel, just type in the Jackson Rudolph Podcast on YouTube and scroll back to episode 62, you can see his original episode and get to hear a lot of those stories. Highly recommend. One of the most fun that I've ever had on an episode. So absolutely loved that, and highly recommend it after we get done here tonight. But as you can see, the title of this episode is Flipping the Script. I gave you guys a little intro for where this idea came from in the beginning. And so, Mr. Plowden, I'm going to pass the microphone to you, and you're the host now, sir. So take it wherever you want to.
So you guys have heard Jackson question us and grill us about different things within the whole sport karate community. And, I'm one of the old dudes. Jackson came around and established himself after I was done competing. So who is Jackson Rudolph? Don't you want to know that too? So that's my interest. So Jackson, why did your parents first enroll you in martial arts lessons? And how old were you?
Yes, sir. So my story is pretty typical, honestly, as far as how I got started in martial arts. I was 6 years old. And I loved watching Samurai. It was Samurai Jack for me. People talk about the Power Rangers and the Ninja Turtles. For me, it was Samurai Jack, which was a cartoon, so it was like totally fake, right? But Samurai Jack is like who I wanted to be when I would watch him on Cartoon Network. And my first grade teacher, name's Karen Armstrong. She was a black belt in Taekwondo. And at a spelling bee when I was in first grade, she did a concrete breaking demonstration. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so because she was affiliated with the local Taekwondo school, at an upcoming school carnival we had, there was a silent auction for a 2-week introductory course for Taekwondo classes. And so I begged my mom and dad to put our name on the list. And as far as I know, we might have been the only name on the list. Who knows? But wound up winning the silent auction and did my typical 2-week introductory course. And I was hooked, and the rest is history from there.
Now, did you stay with that particular school throughout your journey?
I did for the majority of becoming who most people that tune into this show would know Jackson Rudolph as. Most of my journey up to that point, I stayed with that school. I'm a huge proponent of you should stay with your traditional program, even if you become a sport karate world champion, because your traditional program is what gave you the foundation to be that world champion, whether you're a point fighter, an extreme competitor, a traditional specialist, often in another style from what you started in. It doesn't matter. You should always stick with your traditional program. And I also think that's important for gaining the trust of martial arts schools across America, because there's a lot of schools that don't trust the whole tournament system because they're afraid they're going to lose students to the system, which in my experience is very rare that happens. However, that is a stereotype that's out there. So I always shout from the mountaintops, stay with your original school. The way that it wound up turning out for me was 2010. I won my first U.S. Open. I was 12 years old. So it was a youth U.S. Open, but it was a U.S. Open. And I came back to the Taekwondo school and nobody knew about it. The school didn't, a lot of times if you have a notable martial artist that's doing something on a national or international scale, you would use that, to help your school grow. And me, I didn't want any crazy recognition, anything like that. But it was weird that nothing had been said. And so over the course of the next couple of years, it would go on and win another U.S. Open in 2011. And it became apparent that my school was not supportive at the time of me going out and competing on the open circuit as I was. And so ultimately that led to the decision for me to kind of go my own path and, be self-trained in terms of sport karate. I still look to traditional masters to learn as much as I can in various styles. Anytime I'm at the Super Show, I'm trying to soak up as much as I can from guys like Apollo Ladra and Ricardo Laborio and the like. So I am a nerd of martial arts, just like I am a nerd of sport karate. And so I love dabbling in different arts. And I will say that the owners of that school, they don't own a martial arts school anymore, but things have kind of come full circle, and we have a good relationship with them again now. And so, yeah, kind of a little bit of an up and down story there with my traditional program. But again, without that program, I would have never become the martial artist that I've been blessed to be able to be today. And I'm eternally grateful to the opportunities that I was afforded there.
Now, did you do Taekwondo tournaments prior to going to that particular U.S. Open in 11? Okay.
I did. It wasn't Olympic Taekwondo. So a lot of times people say Taekwondo and you automatically picture the Olympic Taekwondo, like Herb Perez style, right?
Yes, sir.
But that's not what we did. So we were WTF Taekwondo, which there's WTF athletes that go and do the Olympic stuff. I'm not saying that's not the Olympic stuff. It is. But it's just the system that we were in. It was kind of a franchise throughout Kentucky, and I think they had a couple of other locations. And they kind of had their own curriculum and their own way of doing it. And the sparring that we did was not Olympic Taekwondo sparring. It also wasn't sport karate sparring. It was some mix somewhere.
Some kind of hybrid, huh?
But yeah, that's how I came up. And we did inter-school tournaments. I'd go up to Louisville every year and compete there, and other small tournaments that my school owner was friends with the promoters around in the area, things like that. So lots of small events. And then I think I did a Bluegrass, and then U.S. Open was my second tournament in 2006. So Bluegrass 2006, my first ever NASCA tournament. Second ever NASCA tournament was U.S. Open of 06.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Most Taekwondo schools don't have a weapons curriculum. Yours did?
It did. But where I got my bow skills was not from their weapons curriculum they already had in place. So the weapons curriculum they had in place, I started at Blue Belt learning how to do nunchucks, which kind of random. But I think that a lot of that in that curriculum was because a lot of kids start martial arts because they see nunchucks, whether it be Bruce Lee or Michelangelo or whatever, right? And nunchucks are like the stereotypical karate weapon, right? And so we learned nunchucks early. We learned some Kali sticks, which I thought was a really fun part of that curriculum. So we mixed in a lot of different weapons, and bow was one of the last weapons that I picked up. And it's because at one point, that school decided to purchase the XMA curriculum, which the XMA curriculum was the first extreme martial arts curriculum to be made broadly available to schools.
Mike Chat's XMA, yes.
And they had the whole binder with the DVDs and all the different volumes. And so my instructor's wife actually decided to learn bow herself. And so, she would go and watch the Taylor Lautner bow DVDs. And then one day she pulled me off to the side. I never thought about it. I actually had a little comma form that I loved doing. And she pulled me off to the side one day and she was like, "You're going to learn bow." And I was like, "Okay, I'll learn bow." And that was my very first bow lesson that day. There's a picture that my mom has of me like in that old school XMA uniform, sleeveless with the zipper and the belt style belt and the shiny silver pants. And that was my first ever bow lesson, was dressed up like that and doing a forward strike about 10 feet over my head.
Okay, that's really interesting. Well, historically, John Sharkey always had fantastic forms competitors. But back in my day, coming up, his forms competitors also fought, right? Mike Chat fought in the adult division at my tournament one year, as he was maturing. But now everyone seems to be a specialist. The fighters, the forms competitors, and even the weapons competitors like yourself specialize. Why do you think that evolved to that?
Well, I think part of it is how many divisions there are in the sport right now, right? Back when everybody did everything, there was 3 divisions you could compete in. There was forms, weapons, and fighting, right?
Very good point.
But now that you have creative weapons, traditional weapons, musical weapons, extreme weapons, that's 4 different routines, or at least they should be different. A lot of people do the same form for creative, extreme, musical, but I always appreciate it when I see different forms in those divisions. I always had little nuanced differences between my creative and musical. You wouldn't see me doing extreme later in my career because I can't jump, right? But I digress, right? So I think the sheer number of divisions, plus the vast majority of young competitors now trick. And if you can trick, you're going to be in both weapons and in the forms division. And so if you do the traditionals as well, because that's what everybody starts being trained in, is the traditionals, next thing you know, your average forms and weapons competitor does both traditionals, 6 of the other divisions. All of a sudden, you're at 8 divisions, add on traditional challenge, 9 divisions. And if you're doing 9 divisions over the course of a weekend, and if you're good going on to runoffs and going on to the stage, you almost don't have time to fight. And so that's one of the big hurdles, is that we have so many forms and weapons divisions, not very many fighting divisions. So I think that's one of the factors. And
that makes a lot of sense.
I would love to see some more fighting divisions get introduced. That's why I love the Battle of Atlanta and what they do with Battle Mania, bringing in tag team, the other events. You can go to the Battle of Atlanta website and see all the different Battle Mania divisions you can register in. But bringing more point fighting options to the competitors, so that if you're a point fighter, you don't just have 2 divisions. You don't just have your open weight and your division, but you've got your open weight, your division. You can pair up with this person and do mixed teams. There's so many different things you can do at Battle of Atlanta. And so I appreciate Battle of Atlanta a lot for doing that, because I think there's a huge disparity in just the number of divisions right now between forms and weapons and fighting. And then the third thing is that I think that it's just the evolution of the sport, right? As certain athletes chose to focus on just one route, right? It makes it to where if you want to beat that person, you don't have the time to spread yourself too thin, right? If you want to train to beat Raymond Daniels in a point fight, you can't spend half your time training forms and weapons. You've got to be like Ray and focus all of your time, like Ray did, on being the best fighter you can be. And same thing, right? If I was spending half my time point fighting, there's no way that I would try to go and train to beat Kalman Choka in weapons, right? So as the era shifted around those early 2000s, where competitors chose to specialize, whether it be because of how many divisions there were, and that's just what they liked most or whatever, if you wanted to beat those elite specialists, you didn't have a choice but to specialize yourself. And that's why it's so rare that we see competitors that are able to not just compete in both point fighting and forms and weapons, but actually able to win. It's extremely rare now. I think the closest person that we have to being able to win it consistently is Alex Mancias, who's been able to win in the weapons division very consistently. He doesn't have a grand championship yet in fighting in the adult division, but he's somebody that's always in the mix and
he's a threat.
Well, right?
Yeah, he's a threat.
I think he's probably as close as we get right now, and I'm sure there's other examples that we could think of. But Rashad Eugene's a great example, right? Rashad Eugene, he's a good fighter. But his forms and weapons, that's what you always see him on stage for,
yeah.
Right? So
you don't have very many Ross Levines.
Exactly, right? Like Ross Levine was probably the last generation's best multi-talented athlete, and being able to win weapons and win point fighting. And every time we bring up Ross Levine on this show, I remind people, Warrior Cups, U.S. Opens, diamond rings, he got them all with a bow in his hands. Put some respect on Ross Levine as an all-time bow competitor. People get shocked when I tell them my top 5 bow competitors all time, which I've never actually said on the podcast, I don't think. But I've got Ross in my top 5. People are like, Ross Levine's, no, he's like maybe fighting. I'm like, no. Ross Levine is a top 5 bow competitor of all time because of the accolades that he obtained, as well as the contributions that he and his coach, Nate Andrade, made to bow. Bow would not be what it is today without the duo of Ross Levine and Nate Andrade.
There you go.
Get off my soapbox there, but thank you.
No. And Nate's so tall swinging that stick. Man.
That's a bow guy thing. Bow guys are typically tall.
Yeah,
Corey Lucas, myself, Nate, Ross. I mean, nobody was as tall as Nate, but like bow guys are typically tall. I don't know why that is.
All right. Well, tell me this. Where does your creativity come from, man?
When you sent me this question ahead of time, it was my favorite question on the list because no one's ever asked me it outright. It's a brilliant question, and it's an interesting answer, right? So I boil creativity down to 3 things: luck, time, and necessity. None of those 3 things are related, right? So luck being the first thing. There are some times, and I got a story for each of these, of times that I've come up with a new move or a new concept or what have you, right? So luck is probably the most common way that creativity comes about, which is kind of funny. So the best story for this is one of my signature moves is what I call the Chris Angel, where I throw the bow up, it rotates horizontally, and I catch it on the back of my hand like this, right? I upgraded it to doing the finger and then spinning it on my finger, all that stuff, right? So all that started from just catching it like this. That move, I did not mastermind that. There's no movie scene of me like writing down a mathematical equation about how I can make it balance. No. I was training with Michaela Johnson in Florida before the U.S. Open because we were teammates on Change the Game at the time. And I broke my bow while we were training, right? And I didn't have a backup, and it was a week before the Open. I knew that Joe Greenhall was going to be bringing bows to the Open, so I was like, I'm going to have to use a bow fresh there, but I got to have a way to train this week. I can't not train just because I broke my bow. And so we went to like a Dick's Sporting Goods, and we got hockey tape, and we taped that bow back together with hockey tape just well enough for me to be able to train with it for those 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
And after a couple days of training with it, you know how tape gets, like on a pull-up bar or whatever, right? The tape started to kind of peel back, and so the outside of where the tape was started to get sticky. And so I was just kind of screwing around with it, and I would kind of throw the bow up and it would just stick on my hand, right? And I'd throw it up, and it would just stick on my hand. And I was like, you know, what if I could do this like for real? Like, what if there was a way for me to do this without needing to actually have like stick them on the back of my hand, right? And so I started playing with it and, you know, figured it out over the course of a bunch of reps. But the idea for that move was 100% luck. I got lucky that I broke that bow.
That is a great story, man.
I had no choice but to put tape on it. The tape got sticky. It would stick to the back of my hand. The next thing I knew, it worked.
That's a great story.
Yes, sir. So there's luck, right? Second thing on the list is time. This is the number 1 most valuable tip that I give every single creative bow student that I train. Give yourself time with your weapon. And I don't mean drilling your form, drilling your sections, drilling your pre-existing tricks. That's not what I'm talking about. You need to do those things. You need to do drills. But I mean, when you have a training session, give yourself 20 to 30 minutes every single day where you just turn the music up, you have no goal in mind, and you just move. And for 20 to 30 minutes, you just work the bow. Go through striking combinations, go through tricks, do what feels natural. And over the course of that 20 to 30 minutes, eventually, you'll do something and you'll be like, wait, what did I just do? How did I do that, right? Or even better, you'll mess something up and you'll catch it in a funny position and be like, wait, could I catch it that way on purpose? And so when you open yourself up to those opportunities, when you give yourself the time to figure things out, because you're never going to create anything new by running your form over and over and over again. That's not how it happens. You have to give yourself the opportunity to create something new. And the only way to give yourself that opportunity is to dedicate time to it. And there is you're not going to sit there and say, I'm going to make up a new move today and then it happens. That's not how creativity works. It happens organically. So give yourself the 20 to 30 minutes every day, turn the music on, let the creative juices flow, and eventually things just happen, right? And then the third thing, and this is the one that most people are going to probably find the most interesting because this is actionable. Necessity. Doesn't so much apply to when I was at a lower level in my career, right? Because before I was winning, losing is normal. So it's like you're trying to make yourself better in all the other ways. You're not thinking like, oh, I have to think of something new and different to be able to win, right? Before you've ever won, when you're trying to win for the first time, you're just like, I got to get stronger. I got to get faster. I got to get better, right? But then after you've been winning for a while, you're strong. You're fast. You're good. You're just as good as anybody else that has a chance to beat you, if not better. And that is when you realize I got to do something different. I got to be one step ahead, right? And so for me, a lot of the tricks that I made up later in my career, probably from around 2015 through 2021, a lot of those tricks that came in that later phase of my career was somebody did something and now I need to adjust. I need to make an adjustment. I need to adapt. I need to take what they did and make it my own and make it better, right? I need to add a spin to it. I need to catch it in a more difficult position. I need to do it without having to look at it, right? I've got to take what people are throwing at me and I've got to reanalyze that and figure out a way to turn it into my own trick and make it better than what they were doing. And then use that to show the judges that direct comparison of, yeah, cool, they did that, but this is why I'm better. Look at me do this instead, right? So sometimes you get lucky. You got to give yourself time to actually come up with the stuff. And sometimes it's born out of necessity because you can be good by getting fast and strong and having good technique and all that. You can get very good that way. You can't be great without doing something that people haven't seen before. In creative forms and weapons, that's what greatness is. Greatness is being able to do something that people have never seen. That's right. And a lot of times that is born out of necessity. You're the man or the woman. Somebody comes up and is challenging you and pressuring you. You don't have a choice but to evolve. What is that next big thing? So that's where creativity comes from, is those three main sources.
That's really, really interesting because I tell people with forms and weapons that it's a situation where the innovators are the grand champions, right? The imitators take second and third. So that is literally more or less what you just described. You man, I love your mindset, young man. Great mindset. And that's something that
I want to touch on that because that was beautifully said. Give me that quote one more time, that the imitators get in second place.
Yeah. The innovators are the grand champions.
Okay.
The imitators are the second and third place people.
I love this. And you can see it if you look across history, right?
Yeah.
I talk about Team Paul Mitchell's weapons team in particular in terms of these great triumvirates, right? Forms and weapons. I always talk about the first great triumvirate was Carmichael and Mike Chatt and John Valera, right? And then in the 2000s, you had the great triumvirate. And honestly, you could probably extend it to 4 or 5, right? But I'm going to go with Cowman, Matt, and Rudy, right? And here's what's interesting is that Cowman, Matt, Rudy was the era of specialization. And notice, none of them did the same thing. It was double sword against chucks against commas. And Cowman was the principal innovator in the 2000s of what you do with swords. And Matt is the all-time innovator of what you do with chucks. And Rudy is the all-time innovator of what you do with commas. So the three innovators were the guys that were finishing first, second, and third in grands. And the guys who weren't making the grands were the guys who exactly what you said were imitating. And the guy who was at the top, Cowman, how many guys did you see doing double sword when Cowman was on top? There wasn't a double sword in that division.
That's right.
After Cowman retired,
you saw
they started coming out of the woodwork, right?
Yep. That's
and
right.
Then you shift to the modern era, right? Where you have myself, Reed Presley, Cole Presley, right? And I'm going to give comma guys, they got their respect. There's a lot of great comma guys. Cole Presley, Tyler Weaver, both great comma guys, right? But if you look at like just myself, Reed, and Cole, we all did something different. Bow, double bow, commas. And we were each innovating in our own special way to try to stay one step ahead of each other. And notice, when I was winning a lot of those overalls, nobody in the adult division was doing single bow. Most of the adult division, when I was in what I would consider like my highest prime, Most of the adult division was double bow and commas. There was hardly anybody doing single bow. And so what you said, it rings true. If you want to be the best, you have to be the innovator. You can't imitate what other people are doing. Like that's like there would be double bow people, right? Double bow people. I'm going to give some respect to Reed Presley here because he was like my all-time number one. He's the best man at my wedding, and he's like my all-time rival, right? Like Matt and Kalman, to my generation, it was me and Reed, right? So I give all the respect to Reed in that regard, right? And there would be double bow people that would try to beat Reed with double bow, and I'm like, that's like you trying to come out and beat me with single bow and trying to throw up, spin 3 times, catch it, and then bounce it on the back of your hand. You're not going to beat me doing what I do, and you're not going to beat Reed doing what he does, right? And so ultimately, some of the guys who were able to have success kind of after Reed, Cole, and I had moved on, right? We see this new generation. We do see people being successful with double bow like Rashad, but Rashad's style is so very different from Reed, it's not even funny.
Yes, it is. That's right.
So being able to become your own competitor is huge. So I love that quote. I need to frame that and put that somewhere. Innovators are the grand champions. Imitators are the ones sitting in second place. I love that.
Well, it's funny coming from a fighting guy too, right? But no, I of course we teach forms in the studio and things, and I've had some individuals who wanted to compete, and that's what I tell them. You want to win grand, have to be the innovator, can't be the imitator. But everybody doesn't want to work that hard. But yeah, I want to say this. Everything you said with relationship to competition and your own philosophy, any aspiring forms or weapons competitor needs to hear this. They really need to hear it because you're giving gems, man. Outstanding information. I'm going to pivot a little bit and just ask you, Chuck Norris's United Fighting Arts Federation, yes, you won that grand championship a couple of times. Yes, how did you become involved with that organization?
So this is a fun story. Chuck Norris's United Fighting Arts Federation, they have an ITC, International Training Conference, every year in Vegas.
Yep.
And that's where they have the Norris Cup tournament. It's only for people who are black belts within the Chuck Norris system. And honestly, that was just a sweet bonus for me, right? Like I have 4 Norris Cups. It was super cool to be able to win those. Grandmaster Norris was there to see 3 of them, and so I got to shake his hand and have conversations with him, which was super cool. But the way that all started is that Aaron Hensley, he comes from the Chuck Norris system as well. He's a school owner of a premier martial arts school. He's actually got multiple locations now. But when I first met him, he was actually the very first school owner that ever hosted me for a seminar. My very first seminar that I ever taught when I was 14 was at Aaron Hensley's premier martial arts school in North Augusta, South Carolina. Right.
Wow.
So yeah, so he and I go way back, and I've taught at his school a number of times. He's got some great students there, and he does great things for the community there. And so he's from that system, and one way or another, I don't know exactly how it all came down the pipeline, but he reached out to me one day, and he was like, "Hey, Chuck Norris wants you to teach bow at this conference that he has every year. The only thing is you have to be a Chuck Norris black belt." And I was like, well, that's crazy. Like, sign me up. What do I need to do? And since he is a master in that system, I was actually able to test under him. And so he literally sent me videos of like all of the curriculum. I memorized the entire curriculum, forms, fighting combinations, the nuances of their techniques, all of their, their student creed and all that stuff. Memorized it in about 2 weeks, and then went and took the test in South Carolina. And what was a little bit more stressful about that was that they actually, every person who tests for a Chuck Norris black belt, you have to film the entire test, and that actually gets sent to Chuck Norris's promotions committee, and then they approve the fact that you passed the test, right? And so we did that, and I passed the test and came out to Vegas to teach at the seminar, and said, well, heck, I'll go ahead and compete. Wound up competing, and really had some great memories there. So the seminars were always huge, always like 75 to 100 kids in the seminars, tons of energy, absolutely loved it. And there's nothing like getting to do a form in front of Grandmaster Norris. So that was a really cool opportunity that I'll remember that forever.
No, that's great. One of my former teammates, Chip Wright, is heavily involved with Mr. Norris's organization. So Chip used to come back and tell us about the Vegas thing.
Yes, sir. And I saw him at the event every year, and everybody would be like, "That's Chuck Norris's stunt double. Do you know that's Chuck Norris's stunt double?" But yeah, very cool.
More than Chuck Norris's stunt double, he could fight.
Yeah.
Okay, Chip Wright was one of the greatest light heavyweights ever. Very good fighter. Okay, let me ask you this now. And Morgan and Avery will get this question often, but how did you balance your educational pursuits with training and tournaments and that type of thing? Because, you always hear people say, "Oh, I can't do it because I'm in school," or, something like that.
So for this one, I will always give the credit to my dad for this philosophy. From the time that I can remember things, he would tell me, "Jackson, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life." He has said that to me more than any other phrase that he's ever said to me outside of "I love you," right? If you love what you do, you will never have to work a day in your life. And that's the motto that I live by, right? So I get this question a lot because it's not just the medical school, but people also see, the Black Belt Magazine work that I do. And now I'm a player development coach for Team Paul Mitchell, and I still help run Team Competitive Edge. And so I have all these different hats that I wear within and outside of the sport karate community. And so I get this question a lot. And to me, it's really simple. There's nothing that I do that I am not thoroughly passionate about.
There you go.
Every single thing that I do, whether it's going to medical school, doesn't matter if it's a 7 a.m. anatomy lab that I don't want to be at, I keep the end goal in mind, right? Every element of what I do, I enjoy. And so if it's something that you're truly passionate about, you will find the time for it. And if you're struggling to find the time for it, you got to check your passion. Because if you can't find the time, it probably means that you don't care enough to make the sacrifices necessary.
Preach.
It probably means that you care more about going out to dinner with your friends that night instead of getting the extra 2 hours in to study or train whatever you need that week, right? So to me, it's always been simple. It's not easy. I'm not going to act like, "Oh, well, it's easy because I love everything I do." No, it's hard. It's hard. I do have to miss, those social events and going out with friends sometimes. Gabrielle will tell you that I don't get to FaceTime her because we're long distance up until the wedding. I don't get to FaceTime her as often as I would like to because I'm always studying or doing work for Paul Mitchell or Century or Black Belt or what have you. But I wouldn't make those sacrifices if I didn't love it. So don't get me wrong. It's difficult. It's not easy to try to balance everything. So don't hear me say that it's simple and think that I'm telling you it's easy. It's not easy. You got to be ready for that grind. But it's simple in that if you're truly passionate about it, you will find the time for it. And for some practical advice, make lists. That's my number one time management thing. Every day, wake up in the morning, I get on my notes app on my phone, I make a list of everything that's got to get done that day. And if it doesn't get done that day, it gets done first thing the next morning, right? So Jackson Rudolph productivity tip. Make a list of things you got to get done every day. Let that list roll over. Your productivity will go through the roof.
Jackson Rudolph, that P word, though, is so vital. Passion. I tell people that, you're not going to get up. I'm here in Michigan. So you're not going to get up and run 5 miles when it's sub-0 degree weather unless you're passionate or crazy or both. But, passion will encourage you to do some things that are not quite human. So you're right. That's it, that passion. Let me ask you this. You're a true fan of sport karate, Jackson. Again, you and I teased that we're both addicts. And this is one of the things that I wrestle with. We have a number of team sponsors. Some are sponsorships that may pay for flights, hotel, registration. Others may be uniform sponsors, but it's a sponsor of some sort. How come our activity has yet to consistently have event sponsorship?
This is a brilliant question. I love this question. And honestly, I think that the answer is simple, right? The product of teams is the athletes, right? So I'll use Team Paul Mitchell as an example, right? Team Paul Mitchell's product is the world-class athletes that we have on that team right now, right? your Sammy Smiths, your Jake Presleys, your Haley Glass, your Alex Mencias, all the way down the roster, everybody, right? The product is the players, right? And companies are willing to invest in those players, in that product, because you can look at those players and you can see how good they are. When you watch Sammy Smith go on stage, you can see the value in Sammy Smith. You know how good she is. And the same is true for anybody on our team right now, right? Now let's flip it to the tournaments. If you look at insert random tournament here outside of a few, the product is not obviously valuable. If you look at US Open, obviously valuable product. Warrior Cup, their night show, obviously valuable product. But if a corporate sponsor happens to lay their eyes on some random night show with a house lighting room, no professional lighting, right? And, some drapes hung up in the back and, a little printed banner across the back that says the name of the tournament, it doesn't look like a professional sporting event. It looks like you guys put together a karate tournament and threw some people on stage to do forms. So the product that teams have is a greater product than what a lot of the tournaments put out, because the product of the teams is the players. It's the performances that those players put out, forms, weapons, fighting, or otherwise. The product of a tournament is the show, right? I think a lot of people get this twisted. A lot of people talk about getting sport karate bigger in terms of how do we get more competitors. It's not about getting more competitors. Would getting more competitors be great? Absolutely it would. But getting more competitors doesn't bring the most money. What brings more money to this sport is viewership. Basketball doesn't make billions of dollars as an industry because of how many basketball players there are. Basketball makes that money because of how many people watch the basketball. That's how sports is in general. So we can get more and more kids to do karate all day long, but until we get more people to watch what we do and see that product that is those athletes fighting or doing forms and weapons on stage, that is what's going to bring in the money. But when a corporate sponsor looks at a tournament where they might see one of those great athletes that the team that's already in the sport karate world has recognized as someone valuable, the corporate sponsor that's outside of sport karate is going to be distracted by, well, yeah, that person, that fighter, those people, they're spectacular, but they're doing this in a gym?
All dressed up with no place to go.
Exactly. And so that's why I think we see great sponsorship opportunities come to teams, because their product is the players and the value is obvious. Whereas with tournaments, some tournaments do a great job, right? If I was an executive at Gatorade and you showed me the US Open night show or the Warrior Cup night show or some of these other night shows, I'd be like, this is awesome. This looks like what a professional sport should be. And if there happens to be any corporate sponsors watching right now, here's one thing that I will say to you. Sport karate should be looked at as an investment, no different than professional skateboarding was. Mountain Dew took a chance on professional skateboarding because somebody in those Mountain Dew offices thought that it was cool. And so they took a chance on it, and they created this thing called the Dew Tour. And now when you talk about professional skateboarding, Mountain Dew is the #1 brand that comes to mind because of the Dew Tour, right? Skateboarding in and of itself before that was not, there was Tony Hawk, but it wasn't like any, good skateboarder could get that type of recognition, right? Sport karate has the potential to be that for some corporate sponsor that wants to step up and say, hey, we're going to sponsor this idea. We're going to invest in this sport as a sport that can obtain viewership. And then if you are that company, then you're going to have the Gatorade Tour of sport karate or whatever the case may be, right? Powerade, if you're watching, we welcome you guys too. Doesn't matter to me. But I think that that's the biggest thing, is we need to improve the quality of the production, because the quality of our players is fantastic. We have world-class athletes. People would love to watch Extreme Forms and Weapons, the traditional right now is exciting too, right? You watch a Jake Presley traditional bow form, you watch a Mason Stowell traditional kata. That is exciting stuff. You watch a Gabrielle traditional kata. I get excited when I watch that, right? Anyway, and then point fighting, the speed, the accuracy, and here's another place that increasing production value comes into play. Point fighting would be so much better if we had replay consistently, right? For two reasons. Number one is you need the spectator to be able to see what's going on.
They need to understand.
To the naked eye, you watch two world-class point fighters clash on a blitz, you got no idea what happened. To you, it looks like they just ran into each other and hugged.
That's right.
That's not what happened, right? So number one is we need the slow-mo replays to be able to show what actually happened. And then when I say that, people always give me this back. They're like, but think about how many calls in point fighting are missed. And think about what are people gonna say when they slow it down and you see an underextended side kick, or you see somebody just tap somebody with the back of their hand instead of throwing a punch. And I say, good, because that will hold our athletes accountable.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's educational. That's right.
The first time that an athlete gets a slow-mo replay of their D side, right, and it's not fully extended, and then they go back and they look at the live stream and all the comments are like, that was underextended, that shouldn't have counted, blah, 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 right? I guarantee you that competitor's next defensive sidekick is going to be fully extended, right? And that increases engagement, right?
It does.
Because
it shows that people are
a football game. What is the talk on social media?
There you go.
Very rarely is it about who won, right? Most of the time the talk is, this shouldn't have been a foul. Yep. This call was terrible. Yep. Refs versus Warriors, refs versus Celtics, right? That's what people talk about.
But that means people are vested. You know, that means that they have an interest. So you're right. That's really interesting. You and I have to talk a little bit more offline about that. That's interesting perspective. In your time in the activity, what are some of the positive changes that you've seen? You know, I'll tell you, Jackson, I'm not a big social media person. I'll be honest with you. Most podcasts I don't watch. You know, my nephew has a really popular podcast, but I told him I don't pay attention to a whole lot of stuff. I just, you know, it really doesn't matter. But everybody can just be so negative in comments and things, you know, and I want to turn that crap off. What are some of the positive changes you've seen in our activity in your time involved?
Well, to address the negative comments first, oftentimes they hate us because they ain't us, right? A lot of the times the negative comments that we see are from people from other forms of martial arts that are intimidated by what we do because they know they can't do it. And so they make up negative things to say about it, like you couldn't do that on the street or whatever, right? So
one of my pet peeves, though, Jackson, one of my pet peeves are the individuals from within the sport who will go online and start dogging judges and things. Mm-hmm. You know, we're part of the process. We don't need to be our biggest critics. Get in there, help make a difference instead of putting it out to the public. Because, as you said, if somebody is watching this who happens to be a corporate individual, they see the negative comments. I don't want my product tied to that. We're destroying ourselves. So I'm sorry, I digress.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I'll tell you the way that I handle it, because I have a podcast. Very rarely am I ever publicly critical of anybody, right? The only times that I'm ever publicly critical of somebody is if I think that, number one, they did something that was disrespectful, because I don't have tolerance for that, right? You should always respect your opponent, your competitors. So I will call people out for that. And if someone did something, if we're doing a film study and the technique was somewhat subpar or whatever, I'll be honest and say, like, hey, they could have hit that front stance, right? But that is constructive criticism.
Correct.
Right? But just because I don't often criticize publicly doesn't mean that I don't give feedback privately. I'm on the phone all the time. If I see something that I don't agree with, then I let people know about it man to man, man to woman, right? Whatever that issue is, I address it so that I know that it's going to be better moving forward without having to create a social media firestorm about it, right? So just because you have a platform, and this is not targeted at anybody, this is to our entire community, just because everybody has a platform, because everybody has social media. Just because you have a social media account doesn't mean that the best way to solve the problem that you see is to talk about it in front of everybody. Right. Sometimes if you see a problem, that problem can be solved by 1 to 4 or 5 people involved with that issue that can make positive change. And so my philosophy on that is go to the source and fix it without anybody knowing. Because it doesn't matter who started the conversation. What matters is if the progress is made. And if you're only starting the conversation so that you can be the guy or girl who started the conversation, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? But I'll digress as well, and we'll get to the positive things, because there are a lot of positive things that this sport has done. I think the visibility of our athletes because of social media is better now than it has ever been. And I'm going to ask any athletes in sport karate right now that if you're kind of questioning, like, man, could I do more on social media? The answer is yes, and do more of it. Because getting those athletes' faces out on these platforms to where literally millions of people will see it, right? If you go across a lot of the big sport karate people right now and you look at the videos, you're like, oh, 5,000 views there, 10,000 views there, 50,000 views there. It adds up really, really quickly. There's a lot of people that are getting to see these athletes. Point fighting, forms and weapons, doesn't matter. These athletes are more visible than they have been since way back in the day when I had Keith Vitale on the podcast and he was talking about how they could go to another country and have dinner and people be coming up wanting pictures, right? Right now, because of social media, we can get that again. Now, back in the day, it was that because that was the karate craze and there were all the martial arts movies and the Karate Kid and all that. And that helped us get bigger and bigger, right? And so then we kind of like hit a valley and then kind of mellowed out and not as many people knew about sport karate. But now because of social media, we have that opportunity to show our athletes and our sport to more people. So I think the visibility of the sport is the number one thing that has improved. And then I also have a hot take on this because, you know, I figure your question probably gets more specifically at what within sport karate, right? Social media is an extrinsic thing.
Well, no, but that's a great comment.
Right. But intrinsically, what do we do better? And some people aren't going to like this. But I think one thing that we do better is we produce better nighttime shows, right? And sometimes we try new things and it's a miss. And sometimes we try new things and it's a hit. Ocean States was a great example of trying a new thing and it was a hit. You put up the big money because you got a sponsor willing to put up the big money. You get all the best fighters there. Organically, matchups on stage, fantastic. Super fights, yes, fantastic. Super forms, right? Even if you don't get everybody that would be the perfect matchup in the regular overall grand championship, which we wound up still getting at Ocean States anyway, so that was a treat for us. By having that additional opportunity with some additional prize money, we now get another compelling matchup that in some cases actually gave us a rematch of something else that we had seen in the show, right? And that helps us build storylines, right?
That's it.
And so Ocean States is one example, but I think it reaches out far beyond that to things that we've been seeing even before the pandemic, but especially as we've come out of the pandemic. I think that night shows are doing a really, really good job of consistently trying to improve production quality. And this is what I was going to say that I don't think people will like. I like the idea of an invitational night show. I don't think that it should be exclusively invitational. I think if I was going to do a night show, this is how I would do it, right? I would have it be 90% invitational, where I know that I am going to feature the top professional athletes in the finals. Because remember, the finals is a product. The finals is a product. I cannot stress that enough. We want people to watch the finals. That's what will make our sport bigger. Okay. Given the fact that the finals is a product, you want all of your best people to be fresh in the finals, right? And so forms and weapons fighting doesn't matter. Also, you're able to promote better that way because you can promote that these two people are definitely going to fight. You can promote that these 2, 3, 4 people are definitely going to go against each other head to head for the money in a division, right? But at the same time, we are an open league. What does that mean? That means that somebody who just shows up to the tournament should have the opportunity to go all the way and win. So make a wild card spot available in every division. 90% invitational, but somebody can still show up and go through the tournament and win their way through and earn their spot on stage.
And that's the purpose of the tournament then.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a feeder.
Exactly. And the criticism that I get for that is, well, then you're not making the people that are the best earn it. And I'm like, think about what you just said. They're the best. They earned it. They earned it by winning 4 U.S. Opens already. They earned it by winning a Warrior Cup already.
There you go.
So that they put in the work, and they've been going through the eliminations at tournaments, in some cases for many competitors for the last decade. Now they're in the adult division. They've earned their reputation as the best, right? So give them that opportunity to be highlighted. And here's the other thing, right? Right now in the organic format where everybody competes against each other, the best are typically going to win anyway, right? So if we look at men's weapons, and I'm just going to pick names out of thin air and say men's weapons is going to be Jake Presley and Rashad Eugene and Alex Mancias, right? Those are guys that have won overalls recently, right? And let's say those 3 guys are the 3 best guys in men's weapons, right? That division is deep right now. There's other guys that have chances to win that division, right? But this is just for the example. I'm going to roll with those 3, right? So you got those 3 guys, and let's just say those 3 guys are the best and they're better than everybody else. Then on average, over the course of a season, most of your finals are going to feature that exact matchup of those competitors who are the best. As long as somebody doesn't screw up and drop, it's going to be those guys, right? The people who are the best. But if your night shows are mostly invitational with the opportunity to win the last spot, well, all of a sudden, the person winning that last spot is typically going to be somebody different. And by the time the person winning that last spot isn't somebody different anymore, if it's the same person for a set criteria, if you win the wild card spot 5 tournaments in a row, you earn a seated spot. You earn a spot in that show as an invitee, right? And then you get another new person that's winning and getting their face in the show, right? So people always say, well, we always see the same people in the night shows. That's not fair. Like, okay, you're going to see those people in the night show anyway. Go ahead and put them there. Give that other person a chance to win their way up there, and then we get to see them. And in some cases, they'll be outclassed by the people who are the best, and that's okay. That's why in the NBA basketball tournament, there's a 1 seed versus an 8 seed. And that 8 seed might get swept, but hey, they got there, right? Or you're going to have occasions where that person wins the wild card, and then they beat everybody that's the best. And now all of a sudden you've got a new storyline, a potential new star, something that gets everybody talking. And that is exactly what the sport needs to increase our viewership.
See, so what you're describing, honestly, America had done in recent years as far as seeding some fighters, but that goes back to the 1970s. You know, Joe Corley used to have what he called Karate Star Wars as part of the finals for the Battle of Atlanta. And he would have seeded fighters and seeded forms competitors, and then people from the daytime would win their way in. But the thing is that now we have the ability, I think, to better produce finals than we've ever had before. But it's going to take some level of investment. And, you know, then that goes back to the sponsorship question, because so many promoters, they don't have the ability to go into their own pockets and really produce. They'll need some level of financial assistance, but you have to be able to package it and sell it. Listen, I say, Jackson, and this was way before your time. There was a guy named Gary Dial, right? And Gary Dial in 76 or 77 made $2 million selling rocks. He called them pet rocks, and he had them in different department stores around the country. Look it up, the pet rock. He made $2 million. And I always say, if Gary Dial could package and sell rocks, something you have in your backyard, we can't package and sell something. Come on, man, that's crazy. Let me ask you this. It's obvious that you're a fan of sparring because of just how much you talk and you pay attention to things. Do you watch a lot of sparring videos and things like that?
Oh, yeah. I love it. I mean, I always tell people sparring is my favorite thing to watch at a tournament. People think that because I'm a forms and weapons guy that I want to watch the forms and weapons division. No, like I enjoy it. But my number one thing that I want to see at a tournament is the fighting divisions, particularly the open weight. I love open weight, love everything about it. And then when certain teams are around, I love team fighting, right? When you get all the best teams at one tournament, which we haven't had in a while, but when you get all the best teams at one tournament, that's the best division in sport karate. 3-man team fighting is the best division in sport karate when you get all the top guys and all the top teams in.
You're right.
That's my opinion. I love it, right? So yeah, I go back and I watch film all the time, and above all else, the first thing that made me fall in love with sport karate was Team Paul Mitchell. Team Paul Mitchell is the reason that I fell in love with sport karate. I went to that US Open and I saw Paul Mitchell athletes on stage and I saw them winning all the time. Forms, weapons, fighting didn't matter. And I said, that is what I want to do. I want to be on that team and I want to win for that team, right? And so because of that, and because I'm a history nerd, as you know all too well, I go back and I watch old tape of the old Paul Mitchell fighters all the time, right? Pedro is one of my favorites to watch. Obviously, KA. I go back and I watch your tapes, right? So I specifically kind of single out and I go back and I watch the Paul Mitchell guys from the previous generations. And I try to find fights that I've never seen before. I rarely watch fights over again. Mm-hmm. I'm that way with everything. I can't watch a movie twice. Gabrielle hates that about me. I can't watch a movie twice. I already know what's going to happen, right? But I will literally go and I will dig up from deep in the recesses of YouTube some random video of Pedro fighting somebody, and I'll sit there and I'll just watch it rooting for Pedro. The fight happened 25, 30 years ago. I'm sitting there rooting for Pedro as if it's happening right now, right? So that is the lens that I watch it through primarily. I watch it as a fan, right? And then recently, as I started getting more involved with Black Belt Magazine and doing commentating and writing the articles, that's when I've started to analyze the game a lot more than I used to. And so now, yes, I will go back and I watch a lot of the current fighters and I analyze things about their style. And I also, on the podcast, I love doing predictions, right? And I love doing matchups. And so by studying that film and knowing what the various fighters' styles are like, that often allows me to make pretty good predictions. And it's funny because sometimes I'll be sitting next to a fighter at a tournament, somebody who's not competing, and we'll be watching a division and, somebody, I'm not going to say any names, but I'll just bring up a general example. Somebody who's top seed in the division will come up, and then somebody who's a contender in the division, but nobody's picking that person to win will come up. And there's been times that I look over at the fighter sitting next to me and I'm like, that guy's going to beat that guy right now. And then they're like, what are you talking about? No, that dude's getting the stage. He's not going to lose to this guy. And I'm like, watch. And then up 2, up 3, up 4, little comeback. Oh, up 3 again, up 4, game over. And then I just look and I'm like, look what happened, right?
There you go.
And so, no, I'm not saying that I'm a psychic or that I get all my point fighting predictions right. I've been wrong plenty of times. But the fact that I enjoy that and I enjoy the challenge of trying to analyze the matchups and see who has the upper hand from a stylistic standpoint, not who's the better overall fighter.
Right.
Because
that's
the better
right.
overall fighter doesn't always win the fight. Sometimes it's all about the matchup, right?
That's it.
So
some people do.
That's why I love it. I could go on about that for hours, but
no, that's great. That's great. We need a few million Jackson Rudolphs as fans of point sparring. And we really be doing something. And then let me ask you this, man. Medical school, Dr. Jackson Rudolph, what are you going to do? How are you going to balance everything then?
Yes, sir. So coming up, there's an exciting time coming up in January. So in January, we start what's called clerkship. And clerkship in most medical schools is where whatever hospital that medical school is associated with, you just start going around that hospital and training in the various specialties. It's a little bit different in the military because we've got hospitals everywhere, right? And so as a medical student in the Army, I've got the opportunity to go and spend some time in Hawaii at the Army Medical Center there. I'm going to be training in Texas a little bit, out in San Diego at the Naval Medical Center there, up in Seattle at Madigan. So there's all of these different military bases across the country that I'm going to have the opportunity to train at over the course of the next year in various specialties, ranging from surgery to psychiatry and everything in between as part of my medical education. So that's one thing that I'm really excited about. And that will be, since I was in 6th grade, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, right? But that will give me the opportunity to get hands-on experience doing each of the specialties and really get an understanding of what is it that I'm going to decide to do for the rest of my professional career. Right. And so, yes, I've always said that I'm going to be a neurosurgeon, and that is still what is number 1 on the list, but I'm going to try everything and see what I enjoy the most, because going back to what we talked about earlier, if I don't find myself passionate about it, if for some reason I get bored sitting there on a brain surgery, I'll go do something else. You know what I mean? I'm going to do something that I am passionate about. I know that I'm passionate about medicine. I know that I'm passionate about helping people and healing and being there for those patients. And so I know this is what I want to do, but I got to figure out exactly what I want to do within it. So that's where I'm at as far as medical school goes. Exactly what type of doctor am I going to be 10 years from now? I don't know, other than a good one. That's about all I know.
There you go. Amen.
But I will also add that sport karate is always in my long-term future, right? I would not have accepted the honor and blessing of a coaching position with Team Paul Mitchell if I didn't expect to be in this for the long haul, right? So I will always be involved in sport karate because I love it too much. And so to answer your question about what's next, right? I think it's pretty apparent, although I am not officially retired. I reserve the right to go run a bow form whenever I feel like it. So everybody stay on your toes for that. Who knows if it'll happen. But it's pretty obvious to everybody that I've transitioned to a new role in the sport, right? Whether it be what I do in the commentating, overall media coverage, obviously coaching I do a ton of. So that's where I'm at in the sport right now. In the future, and I've never said this publicly, I'd love to have a tournament someday. I'd love to be a promoter. I'd love to make that happen and help give athletes a platform and give them a home where it's like, hey, this is one of the tournaments where you're going to get seen by millions of people, right? That's my vision. My vision is I don't just want to be a promoter one day and just have a tournament, but I want to have a tournament that is a product that people will want to tune into, right? And I will openly admit that I want to work with all of the existing tournaments when it's time for me to make that happen. It won't be time for me to make that happen anytime soon, but this is not Jackson saying, I'm going to be a promoter and I'm going to do a bigger and better tournament than the U.S. Open. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I want to work with the U.S. Open, and I want to work with the Warrior Cup, and I want to work with these big events, all the NASCAR World Tour events, right? I want to work with those events and create a product that is unified. Big theme in the sport right now is unification, right? And create a product that will allow millions of people to enjoy this sport for years and years to come. So that's something that I would love to do, right? Now, nobody get excited saying, Jackson's going to run a tournament. No, we are 15 to 20 years from Jackson running a tournament, okay? Jackson needs to go and do the medical school thing and balance sport karate and do all that first.
And get married.
Yeah, and get married coming up on June 25th, right? So Jackson has to get that part figured out first. Jackson will have children to compete in his tournament before Jackson has a tournament. So everybody pump the brakes on that a little bit. But that is a long-term goal of mine. I would love to do that.
That's great, man. Okay, well, we've been at this for a little while. I hope we haven't bored anyone, but it's your show. You're the host again, buddy.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much. I had a ton of fun doing that. Again, just an honor for me, for you to even have this idea of like, hey, I want to know more of your story. And, having been over 100 episodes in at this point, we've done some Q&As and stuff like that here and there, but I've never really just sat down and kind of gone from the beginning and told, what I'm all about.
This was gold, Jackson. It was gold.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so hopefully our Black Belt Magazine audience now has a little bit better idea of who this random sport karate dude that spins a green stick is. Now you guys know a little bit more of who I am. And thank you. I see Sue Diaz giving love in the comments, Jeannie Jones, Angela Brumet. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you to everybody tuning in. This show would not be possible without your support. And one last huge thank you to you, Mr. Plowden.
Thank you,
excellent
Jackson.
show once again. And this is going to be a regular thing. Every 50 episodes or so, we're gonna have to get you back on here.
Hey, listen, feed my addiction. Feed me. All right. Thanks, man.
I love it. So once again, thank you, everybody. Thank you to Black Belt Magazine for sponsoring the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. This has been episode 102. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph, and I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.